It's a hymn. A chorale is basically a German. That's what they call a hymn in Germany. Is a chorale. Bach, as you know, was born in a small town, right? Eisenach. Anybody been to Germany? Toured Germany? Okay. Eisenach is in the middle of Germany, and if you remember right, there was a lot of conflict in Germany back in the 1600s because of the conflict between Martin Luther and the Catholic Church, and all the Catholics went to the southern part of Germany, and all the Protestants went to the northern part of Germany. And Bach was born right in the middle, but he eventually modulated up. He was a Lutheran. He was not a Catholic. And that's why when I was first starting to play, when I was 13, 14, 15, if I substituted at a Catholic church, they didn't want to hear the music of Bach because he was a Lutheran, not a Roman Catholic. Doesn't happen anymore. But we know the music of Bach because, not just because he was an incredible accumulation of all the Baroque music that had happened up to that point, of all the composers with his own unique individual style of composition. We know of his music because of another composer in 1830 and 1840. Anybody know who that was? Mendelssohn. Who said that? You get the A for the day. Mendelssohn brought forth, he was in Leipzig, and that's where Bach had been when he died. And he started collecting all the scores of Bach because Bach was considered in 1830, 1840 to be an old composer. And they just let his wife, when he died, his second wife, who was his second cousin, by the way. Well, I mean, you're going to have 20 kids, you got to have 2 wives, right? 10 and 10, right? So his wife actually had to use his scores. The paper, the value of the paper was worth more than the music. And she sold the value of the paper to the fish market, and they were wrapping fish up in Bach's scores. If you could get a hold of one of those little scores right now, they're worth millions of dollars. Yes. So, he kind of had gone by the wayside. Mendelssohn started performing Bach on the organ and with the orchestras and doing like the Mass in B minor and the Passions, and brought him alive, and they collected the music of Bach in the Gesellschaft in Germany. And then after that, people started saying, who was this guy again? And that's how we know so much about him, because they've written books about him. Besides serving in some courts, meaning for princes and things, his last job is where he's really known, in Leipzig. He was in charge of music at 3 churches. And he taught algebra, and he taught Latin, and he had 20 kids. And there was a mini ice age, so a lot of those children died when they were infants because they were getting sick. There was a mini ice age from about 1700 to 1750, and so death was all around him. So his faith was the most important thing to him. And he was a very devout Lutheran Christian. And so all of the sacred music he wrote based on the chorales, the words were the most important thing for him. But he was not just an organist. Everybody thinks of him as an organist. He was a fabulous violin and viola, and he also understood cello, and he also understood about how the wind instruments worked, so he was able to compose for all of these instruments. And he used to have to write a cantata every Sunday. He had a new cantata based on the scriptures for that day. Cantatas were for him, were like mini operas. They had recitative, aria, choruses, and at the end, the whole congregation sang the hymn that the cantata was based on. Now, if you would like to go back to that time period, 1723 to 1750, you could go to St. Thomas in Leipzig, I've been there, and attend the church service. It started at 8 and it finished at 12 or 12:30. Well, they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have football games. They didn't have restaurants to go to. So everybody wanted to go to church. And they would have an hour's sermon, an hour of prayers, and they'd have all the liturgy and all the music. So it was very, very important. So you can imagine what his life was like. You couldn't just drop by. He was busy writing music all the time and taking care of 20 kids with his wife. I take that back. Maybe he wasn't taking care of the kids. Yeah, probably not. So this is the man who composed all of this. He had no intention of fame, no intention of ego, but he was not nice to deal with. We know that. If you were incompetent in playing for him or singing for him, he could be really nasty. We know that. So he was just such a perfectionist, but he was an amazing person, a genius. And it's so sad how he died. A lot of people don't know this. He died 65 years old. He had eye surgery. Can you imagine having eye surgery in 1750? And the eye surgery didn't kill him. It was the infection that he got. It was July of 1750. And people later on, musicologists came back and said, when Bach died, that was the end of the Baroque period. So we use his death date kind of as the end. But other elements of Baroque continued on in the 19th and 20th century. Things like fugue, which he was very famous for, and other kinds of counterpoint and structures are still in our music today. So he was an amazing person. The next piece I'm going to play is from one of his cantatas. I'm sorry, let me go backwards. The first piece I played was actually the Lutheran equivalent of the Gloria in the excuse me, in the Roman Catholic Church. They sing the Gloria. Glory be to God on high, peace on earth. They wrote a German text, and that piece that I just played is the equivalent of that, and the congregation would sing all the verses. This piece, I'm going to start it. It's from a cantata that was written for Advent, but it's done at other times of year. And when I start it, you might recognize it.